You recording?
Everything's weird over here.
It is. We're off center.
We're off center. It's 900 degrees in this room.
Are we recording? Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the June 25th,
Okay,
2024 meeting, regular business meeting, or I'm sorry, work session of the McMinnville City Council. I would like to call the meeting to order and hand the microphone over to our Parks and Recreation Director, Susan Muir.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi.
Hi, councilors. Susan Muir, the Parks and Recreation Director, and I am here tonight with our consultant team and several of the staff team members are online or in the room, and we're excited to be here tonight. We've talked to you quite a bit about the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan, and you gave us some feedback the last time we were here, and we've made some adjustments, and we've brought the final version for you. We're not sure how many comments or how much discussion you want to have. We'll give a brief overview of the changes since you saw it last, but we just wanted to make sure that you had the time you needed to ask any questions before the resolution to adopt, which is later on your agenda. So we thought we would do that. We've broken this work session into two sections. The first will be on the PROS plan itself, and then the second one will be on the system development charge methodology and the changes that we've made there. So with that, the consultants that are online, we have John Phoenix and Ellie Schaefer from MIG are on the line, and then Michaela Jellicoe is going to help us on the second agenda item related to system development charges. So I will turn it over to John. Hi, John.
Hi, Susan. Good evening, everyone, Mayor and Council. We're really excited to be here with you tonight. This has been 2 years in the making. Thousands of different folks from the community have been involved, and we're just excited to share with you the final plan. So I'm John Phoenix with MIG. I've been managing this project from start to finish, and as Susan mentioned, we've got other folks on our team tonight who will be helping with the presentation. I should mention we had partners on our team as well, Talitha Consults and Community Attributes, and Michaela is going to be providing a presentation on SDCs in just a minute. So I have a quick presentation. We spent quite a bit of time back in April at that work session reviewing the draft plan, and at that time the public comment period was open, so we still had comments to collect. We had just wrapped up our meeting with the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Advisory Committee. So we were just sharing results from that. So I'm going to share tonight a little bit about everything we heard, including from the last council meeting and how that got reflected into this final plan. So a quick recap of what this plan is all about. Why is the city taking on this effort? Various reasons. I mentioned 4 here that are probably the most important. One is updating the inventory and getting a better sense of existing conditions. As you may know, the last plan was completed in 1999. Things have been different over the years, and so this plan was an important opportunity to get a handle of what's out there and what condition is it in. We looked at needs and priorities from the community. This process was equity driven. We had all sorts of different opportunities in Spanish and English to really hear from a broad cross-section of the community about needs and future vision. So we also updated goals and policies for the park system plan. This is a long-term plan. We're looking out for the next 20 years. So we've got a long list of projects and priorities over the short, medium, and long term. We've taken this through a 2-year planning process starting back in the fall of 2022. And it kind of follows those 4 bullet points I just mentioned. So looking at inventory, launching the public process, hearing from the community, looking at the vision, and then putting the plan together with recommendations. It's important to note that this, again, is a community-driven plan. You can see at the bottom we had interactions with the community, council, the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Advisory Committee, which was the advisory committee for this planning process, and then staff team as well. And those both influenced what went into the plan and revisions that would go on to different work products and to what you see tonight. This really was pretty incredible outreach process. I want to applaud staff, in particular Susan, for her leadership in making sure no stone was unturned, no door was left behind to make sure folks knew about this process. So we had over 3,700 respondents from 2 different surveys. One kind of towards the beginning of the process, another towards the end to hear about priorities. We had in-person and online conversations, one-on-one and in small groups with a variety of folks representing different interests, including schools, the downtown and tourism, and then the county. We had pop-up events. That's the image on the top right. We wanted to hear from the youth, from young adults, and then we had various meetings with council, advisory committee, and so on. So the plan itself, putting it all together, we have 5 chapters. So an introduction to explain what's what. We've got the park system snapshot talking about existing conditions, vision, goals, and objectives for the future, and then opportunities, which includes recommendations, and then the action plan to put it all together. The plan's intended to be user-friendly, so the details are included in appendices. So we've got the updated inventory, results of the needs assessment survey, the 20-year project list, and then the second survey summary for community priorities. So this brings us back to this past April. Last time we talked about this plan, we presented the draft plan and heard from council on some comments and questions that you all had. So just a recap of some of those. A couple of projects that were mentioned. One is adding an additional trail, an off-street trail from Joe Dancer Park to Linfield College. That was also shown in the 1999 plan. There was a comment about adding another central McMinnville infill park, So we had one infill park shown back then, and the thought was to add another infill park closer into McMinnville. There was some discussion about climate resiliency, making sure that's reflected in projects and recommendations. Another on making sure parks feel welcoming and safe. That's absolute priority. We heard that time and time again, so making sure that's reflected in recommendations. High quality equipment. There was a comment about, once we invest in these things and make these improvements, making sure purchasing and design and maintenance practices all think through long-term use. So we're not having to go back and replace something right away. Some natural area improvements. We had some policies related to natural area protection. There was a comment about making sure we're specifying the camas plant in parks and open spaces. And then lastly, a comment about ensuring we have fitness equipment in parks. So some key changes, what went into the final plan from the last time you saw it. We have a few others that are listed here. These are just some of the main recommendations. We also had about a dozen comments to the online public comment forum with some good thoughts and questions and comments. So those were also incorporated. So 4, I just wanted to touch on, just so it's clear. The first is, as I just mentioned, we added an additional infill, what we're calling an infill park into a developed part of central McMinnville. After talking with staff, that was prioritized into the 5-year action plan. If you remember, we had a 20-year long-term project list and then a short-term priority list, which we're calling the 5-year plan. We added that connection that was mentioned from the 99 plan to connect Dancer Park. That was also prioritized into the 5-year list. And then we had a couple of other adjustments moving some minor projects from the 5-year list to the 20-year list and vice versa. And then lastly, I think this one's important because this plan is also focused on ensuring we're taking care of what we're investing in. So we made sure we added some language around staffing levels, making sure we're keeping up staffing to accommodate that expanding system. So last slide, and I want to hand it back over to Susan. The plan, the final version and appendices is on the project website. So you can scan this little T-Rex QR code or go to the project website to download those materials. But that is on the website as well as all the other information and materials that we've developed over the course of the past 2 years. So that's the short presentation. I'd like to turn it back over to Susan.
Thanks, John. I thought I would just kick off your conversation by letting you know that there are several next steps. This plan is comprehensive. It includes budget recommendations. It includes staffing recommendations. It includes how we program parks. So there's a lot of different elements that will come after you adopt tonight, including how we implement the system development charges. And we'll talk about that as the second part of this work session. You also know that we're working on a park maintenance build back program. That's going to be ongoing, and we'll be talking about that through the budget cycles. We originally had presented it as a 3-year build back program, but it looks like it's going to be 5 years. And we really appreciate all of the support and strength and resources that park maintenance has been given over the last couple of years. It's really made a difference, and we feel like we're headed in the right direction, but that's going to be an ongoing conversation that we need to constantly have as we get more acreage on. We'll continue to look at that. We also have some comprehensive plan and land use changes. We will schedule those for the fall and take those through the Planning Commission and ultimately back to you. And then obviously one of the critical funding components of this is one that we won't be taking forward to the voters for a while, no sooner than May of 2025, but we will be having a capital bond conversation that includes the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan project list. So there's really a lot of next steps that need to happen, and this is the kind of the definition of a plan like this, to make sure that we're constantly keeping it updated, constantly renewing it, and cycling back and making sure that everything is working together as it should with the different elements that this plan touches. So it seems a little odd to say thank you to people before we adopt, but I don't think we'll have a chance to do that. So I just want to acknowledge that MIG and their sub-consultants really did a great job of helping us with this, particularly related to the equity component of what we did, and I just really appreciated their insight into that. You, the mayor and council, funding this and also giving us some really good and critical feedback for this, particularly Councilor Gary, who was also acting on the DEIAC on this project. The Planning Commission, I thought back to the bus tour that we did, at the very beginning of this, and had the DEIAC and the Planning Commission come along on that. I think most importantly, the community members, when we were advertising on social media that we were going to be down at Joe Dancer asking people to take surveys, people literally came to find us to take the survey and get the $2 bill. But it was really, the community was very engaged in this, and it really made the outcome of this plan different than what it would have been if we hadn't had that level of engagement. The project team was Noelle Amaya, Liz Fazar, Heather Richards, Tom Schauer, David Renshaw, and Katie Noyd. They really spent the bulk of their time helping with the formulation and working with MIG and me on it. And then, of course, I think every staff person in this room, I couldn't safely say, also had a hand in this plan and worked on some element of it. So it really was a joint effort, including Scott, who had to help us with the webpage when we were trying to hand over the address to our management instead of MIG's. So everybody really has touched this. And then the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee, I mentioned this in the staff report, it really was a game changer for us to have them acting in the role of a formal project advisory committee, and to be able to be at their last meeting when they made the motion to recommend approving it, and let them know that their participation in this means that they will be invited to the ribbon cutting on the path connecting Grand Haven Elementary to Chagrin Park, which is one of the high priority projects that we have, so that more people can have better access to parks. Was really kind of a cool thing to see, and I can't wait to cut that ribbon with them. We got free bus tour from YCTA. There were several people on the Parks and Rec team that walked the parks and walked the neighborhoods and really took it to heart that we wanted to hear from everybody. There's a lot of people that I would mention that did that work, but all in all, I just really want to thank everybody that was involved in this, from the consultant team to elected officials to staff to the community. And with that, I will say what we want to do is make sure that you're comfortable tonight with the resolution that's later on in your agenda. And if you have any questions that you'd like us to answer before we get there, we'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you. I'll open it up for questions. Okay, you've got one? Good. Please. Councilor Chenoweth.
Thank you, Mayor. It's not normal that I do this. Did you see the comments we got from Mark Davis?
We did. We saw those today, and I actually had a chance to talk with Mark after I received them. I think, and I wouldn't want to speak for Mark, but what I will say is I believe that what you're going to see with the relationship to making sure we do the land use component follow-ups from this plan tonight will really get at the heart of the issue that he was talking about related to how this fits into the whole buildable lands analysis and that kind of stuff. So we have those scheduled for fall. And also, one other thing I would say is there's a little bit more context than what was in the communication today, and John can give us a little bit more about that in terms of the acreages and how that looked, if you'd like us to address that.
I would love that address. That was actually where I was going with this, is I would like to hear what the response is to this before we vote on it.
Sure. John, do you want to talk a little bit about the context of the acreages that were in the comments?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, great question. I believe I might be touching on a few items that we talked about in previous meetings, but I'll do the best I can to answer this one. So the acreages that are in this plan, those are a level of service, what we typically call level of service. So in this case, the plan's recommending a minimum level of service of 10.3 acres per thousand. And that's pretty typical to have a park system that requires some kind of a level of service standard that's numeric based, so acreage per thousand. What this plan also has is much more than an acreage based look at park need and providing new park land. In particular, again, focusing on community equity, this plan looks at park access. So there's another policy, kind of a companion to the level of service number, that calls for basically a 10-minute walk to a park. So there are several areas, several neighborhoods in McMinnville that don't have great park access. And so this other policy works hand in hand with the numeric-based standard to ensure, as opportunities arise, there is pretty clear direction on where new parkland should be located. So there's an access-based level of service, there's a numeric-based level of service, and then the third point is the park quality level of service. So kind of a third dimension is looking at existing parks. And this plan attempts to balance growth areas, areas that aren't built yet, don't have parks yet, that will need future parks, with quite a bit of assets and inventory that do exist. And so that's kind of the third component, is looking at level of service in existing parks. So how well are existing parks meeting the needs of the community, aging infrastructure, deferred maintenance, safety. Those were all things that came to the top of the list throughout the planning process, I would say. And I believe I heard a lot from this council as well. So it really is a holistic look at how we define park need and level of service. So the numeric-based, the access-based, and the quality-based were all equally applied to how we look at parkland need. So I'll stop there and happy to answer more.
Well, I'm not sure we really got, I thank you very much for setting the context. I'm not sure that we quite got the answer, though, that Councillor Chenoweth, for the question that Councillor Chenoweth asked, which was reflective of Mr. Davis's comments submitted today, which is the disparity between bringing in hundreds of acres for the comp plan for parkland being expressed in one setting, and then this plan expressing a reduction to 49 acres. Councillors, that's what you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of critical of the excess number of acres we started with. I made comments to that effect when we discussed this in other meetings. But dropping to 49 seemed rather steep. So I'm trying to figure out exactly how did we get there?
And I think there's some the context part that I was talking about also. That acres 49 is for those neighborhood and community parks. That does not include all of the acreage that we have in the plan related to natural resources and natural areas, which we do consider recreation. But I think in terms of buildable parkland, that's that 49 acres, but is it 100 and, John, remind me what the total number is. So it wasn't exactly apples to apples when we looked at those numbers that came in. It did shrink, and I think we all recognize that there was right sizing that needed to happen related to budget, maintenance, a lot of different things related to parks. But I think if there was a disagreement, it was on how we classified those acreages to come up with 49 acres versus 300 acres, and we see it more as, John, remind me of the number.
Yeah, it's a total of 142 acres that are proposed in the plan, and that includes developed parks, so neighborhood and community park, and then proposed greenways. There's almost 93 acres of proposed greenways in the plan.
And this is also the opportunity, the reconciliation that I mentioned. We'll have that opportunity to go back and look at that. This plan really does address more than land use, but of course, if the budget reconciliation doesn't come back, we'll come back and talk about the project list changing because the budget isn't the right size. If the land use conversation changes something, we'll come back and talk to council about that, because ultimately you will be adopting that.
I guess one of my concerns is, once we, and correct me if I'm wrong in my thinking, it's easier to take land away later than it is to try to get it back that we've not designated to parks. And I just don't want to put us in a box.
I think the timeline that we have mapped out for how quickly the comp plan amendments will come forward should keep us in a safe territory for that.
Councilor Geary, did you have?
This doesn't flip dedicate any land to parks. It demonstrates the need for finding land to turn to parks.
Yeah.
And so confirming what I hear you also say is it's 142 acres of open space in the plan, not 49. Okay. Okay. I have just a few items, thoughts, especially on that comment. The numbers referenced are more came to us through planning processes, and to me, sometimes the numbers that get spit out there are sort of byproducts of shoving a whole slew of really rigid planning data into an autoclave and smashing it together, and then the parks number comes shooting out. And so that is my way of saying this pros plan number that we have, I feel way more comfortable with our ability to achieve this acreage really effectively, because it's married with all the language in the plan that not only right sizes our ability to deliver what's in the plan and the parks for people, but modernizing what it means and what we need to deliver parks to people. So you could give us 392 acres, but we could be more effective with 142 acres spread out. This plan, this 20-year plan, has safe, modern, low, no barrier parks within a 10-minute, 15-minute walk from people's houses is what we're trying to go with. And we could achieve that with less acres because we're defining success differently, not large swaths of land. I mean, if you want to give me a bunch of acres, I would love to have no built environment on them and open spaces. But I'm comfortable with the acreage that's listed in here because I think the plan that we're marrying it with and the steps we're going to take to ensure we can build that plan for the next 20 years tell me it's going to be a really solid product. So I appreciate the plan's ability to turn those acres into an effective layout and roadmap for parks and open spaces in our community.
Councilor Peralta?
Thank you, Mayor. Can people hear me? Yeah, that's better.
Thank you.
Interesting conversation on the dais. So my impression, just looking at the costs, is that if we assume that it's 40-something acres in the built environment and then another 100 acres that is not built, then the 100-acre maintenance cost is about $500 an acre. and the built environment cost will range on the low end from 3,000 to 5,000 to 7,000, basically. So one benefit from putting the plan together this way is that you're focusing the maintenance resources on specific targeted areas within the broader framework. And the factor of cost on an year-over-year basis is something like 1/12 the cost for the non-developed area, or 1/16 or something like that. So I think from a carrying forward cost, what you did makes a lot of sense. And then looking at this might be a little bit ahead of where you would like for this part of the conversation, but one of the things I really appreciated about this plan versus the current plan that has expired is that the current plan that's expired, most of what it planned for wasn't funded, whereas this actually envisions a funding model for at least the first 5 years, and I couldn't quite figure out exactly what happened after that, but I think at least for the initial stuff, I really appreciated that it was like not completely dependent on outside grants. Not that you're not going to seek those, but to me that makes it a lot more realistic that we're actually going to complete the project. So I appreciated that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do either of my counselors online have anything to add or questions to ask?
No, I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any additional comments or questions at this time?
Only superlatives, so we can move forward to the next portion.
Right. Then unless you have more? Okay, wonderful. Then the work session is adjourned at 6:31 p.m.
I'm sorry, we
Oh,
do have a second item. I thought you meant, is this item is
That's
done.
what I
Excuse me.
thought, too.
We do have the system development charges. I apologize, Mayor.
No,
And for that, if I can just run with it, Michaela Jellicoe is online, and we did make some changes to it. I think what I'm hoping to get out of you tonight is direction on how you would like us to roll it out. We've talked about a couple of different options. You've got numbers in the staff report that suggest we could adopt 30% of the full fee this year, go to 60% next year, and then 100% by year 3. And Michaela will kind of walk us through some of those changes, and then at the end, I'll try and give you what I see are 3 pretty good options for you to give me head nods about how we should proceed ahead, so that I can go talk more in detail with the Chamber of Commerce and builders and contractors in the community and give them a heads up that this is coming and what the timeline might look like. So with that, I'll hand it over to Michaela.
Good evening. I am going to share my screen and quickly walk through the changes. Right. So we haven't changed very much, but it did have some impacts. The pros plan updated the 20-year capital project list, which has an impact on the calculations. So that changes the parks cost per acre and flows through to investment needed for growth and investment per person, and ultimately resulting in changes to the net cost per person that informs the maximum allowable park SDC. So that's the only change that was made since the last time you saw this information. The result, these are the maximum allowable park system development charges per unit. We have not changed the structure of these rates or anything, and the change has been small enough that it didn't really change the comparison to other cities particularly. So we're looking at maximum allowable park SDC per unit ranging from 6,000 and 15,600 per dwelling unit, depending on the size of that unit, and between 78 cents per square foot up to $3.47 per square foot, depending on the type of non-residential use. as Susan mentioned, you can consider a phased approach. So this is what a sample phased approach looks like. I think we presented this last time. This has been updated based on those updated per unit numbers. So this phased approach is looking at 3 years. So dividing that up over 3 years, reaching the maximum by year 3. And so that shows what the rates would look like. So in year 1, it would be 33%, range between 2,000 to 5,000 per unit, and 26 cents to $1.16, depending on the residential size, residential use type. And in year 1, estimated annual SDCs in year 1 are about 1.3 million. When you reach the maximum, that's about 3.9 million based on the updated numbers. You can also see the annual amount of SDCs foregone if you choose a phased approach, so you will be losing potential SDCs. And that amounts to about 3.9 million of lost SDCs over those three years of phasing. Susan, do you want to share your?
Sure. Thanks, Michaela. So really the rollout options that you have, we've talked about the full implementation after we do the 90 days notification process and bring an ordinance back to you. That's just going to 100% implementation as soon as we can under the ordinance guidelines. The other option that Michaela just went through is phasing it in over 3 years. You've seen that a couple times. We provided you the potential foregone revenue in the staff report if you were interested in that number. And then the third one is a hybrid. So this one you haven't seen before, but I've been talking to James Lofton and hearing a little bit about the conversation related to engineering fees. And so kind of came up with an option that you could consider that might mirror that a little bit, which would include a grace period of 3 months after the ordinance adoption. So in total, 6 months from now, anything submitted after approximately January 1st would fall under the new system development charge. And then there would be that second sort of grandfathering or vesting where for those who did submit prior to January 1st, they have to pull their permits by July 1st, 2025. So it's kind of a hybrid. It gets us to full cost recovery on the potential SDCs sooner, but also gives a bigger, longer time for me to go talk to people and let them know this is coming, for them to give feedback on it, and then for them to get plans ready and bring them in if they want to before the effective date of it. So those are sort of the 3 options that we came up with. Like I said, you've talked about the first 2 before, and we just wanted to provide you with something else. What I'm looking for tonight is head nods about one of these that I can go talk to the development community about.
Thank you. Who would like to start? Councilor Chenoweth? No. Councilor Geary?
Yeah, thank you for the option. I know we've heard this Parks STC conversation figure and rollout a few times already, so closing the book on this to push the plan, actually give it gas in the tank. And I think of the options you listed, especially looking at the estimated foregone revenue from the phase-in at 33, 66, 100. How many projects are left on the table from that 5-year plan? I mean, even if we're just able to put in the bathroom at West Hills Park, they would throw a ticker tape parade for everybody if we could do that. And to leave that just sitting right there, I think the hybrid option allows the builders and the development community, of which I'm a part of. I pull permits all the time, build this stuff into our rate models. I think it's a great opportunity to allow us to know and understand and expect and make decisions, and the timeline that you guys put in there is plenty of time for actual projects on the board to get in before the rates change, and it's a reasonable period of time to allow that. And it also serves as a de facto notice that if you don't, this is the new model that will come in full freight, and you have plenty of on-ramp that if it's not a project you can get in before then, you can build it into your model for costing. So I think that option 3 hybrid would be where I would be pushing for.
Kayla, can you put that previous slide up so that if anybody wants, yeah, Thank you.
Additional comments?
I'm interested in hearing what others have to say.
Do any counselors have additional comments? I respect that you would open by saying you know what I'm going to say. Council President, do you have anything you want to add? Okay. Well, there's no additional comments for you to hear, Councilor Peralta. Would you like to add any?
I can add something. So I would definitely not be for option 1. Option 2 would be my preference, but I could get behind option 3.
The main comment that I have is that whether we do option 2 or option 3, I agree with Councilor Garvin on option 1, but whether we do option 2 or option 3, I think we need to make sure that the costs are not applied to builders until the end of the process, so that it's more of a pass-through rather than an imposition and money out of pocket. That's really important. That was a big deal to them when Newburgh did their SDC changes, and I imagine it would be the same here. So I think that's one consideration. And as to the choices between those two proposals, I'll give it some thought in the next couple of hours.
And this is not on the later agenda for action.
Then it might be a while.
Yeah.
And Councilor Payne, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Sorry, yes. Well, not as much really, because I agree with Council President Garvin on not loving option 1 and then supporting option 2, and I could get behind option 3.
Thank you. And at this point, Councilor Chenoweth, would you like to add anything?
I just have a question for clarity, and you may have said it and I was distracted, and if so, I apologize. But on option 3 on the hybrid, is that assuming that the hybrid is, once the hybrid is done, you're going right to option 1?
No, I'm sorry, that was meant to be a hybrid of 1 and 2. It gets us to the full amount before option 2 would, but gives us more notification time for, to work with developers. I originally had it called the engineering fee, mirroring that, but it didn't seem like it was the same thing. So the name is kind of irrelevant. It's a hybrid of the two, going full speed ahead as soon as possible, phasing it in over time, or using the phase-in time to really communicate with people that the timing is coming and here's what it looks like.
Okay, yeah, I mean, everybody knows I'm not really a huge fan of more SDCs at this time. And I would, if there was an option that was somewhere between 2 and, mixed 2 and 3, I think that might hit more the sweet spot of what I've heard, even out of, and maybe I misunderstood, but out of what Councilor Garvin was saying the last time we had this conversation. But I hate to say too much because I don't really think that this is a good direction in the first place. I think funding the parks is important, but going to a full 100% recovery in a short window, I think is just going to be added cost. It's going to, yes, right now we have a good differential between market price and assessed value and costs, but we've seen what happens when markets crash, and markets can crash. And I think there's going to come a point where all of these SDCs that we're rolling up are going to come back to bite us, and I have concerns about that, so I'm going to continue to voice those.
Thank you very much. Any additional thoughts or comments right now? Director Muir?
Just one quick follow-up to Councilor Peralta. I know you had mentioned under the discussion part of the staff report, there was a little bit of a comment related to what you had suggested in terms of assessing the fee at the transaction time. And so we were if you would like us to look into that, that obviously would affect a lot more than just the park system development charges, and I'd have to work very closely with engineering about how that could actually be tracked, and I think it would take a lot more administrative costs with less surety of actually receiving the payment. But if you would like us to put that on the list of things to look at, we certainly could.
Yes, I think you should look at it, and I would contact the city of Newburgh to see what they did to implement their changes.
And like I said, that would probably be a separate process because it would affect all of the system development charges. But I'll talk to James about it.
Okay, well, I think you hear that the general direction of the council is to point towards 2 or 3, that 1 has been clearly eliminated. And if I'm reading the room correctly, the kind of driving intent behind that is to make sure that everybody has plenty of notification, especially everybody that's in the pipeline, whether they have, kind of regardless if we know that they are working towards something right now, that we should be really proactive, as I know our teams work to be, but I think that's what's being underlined, is that we don't want anybody surprised with charges or unexpected costs when they have already laid out their plans and budgeted for their own projects. Any additional comments? Did I get it wrong at all? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now, just double checking my packet here. Now we will adjourn the work session at 6:46 p.m. and we will take a 14-minute break and start the regular council meeting at 7 p.m. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
fairs, and I finally get to go to one.
Recording in progress.
It's 6:59, so if I could invite everyone back to their seats, we'll get going here in just a moment. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 25th, 2024 regular business meeting of the McMinnville City Council. I'd like to call the meeting to order and request that our Deputy City Recorder, Daniel Ruiz, do a roll call, please.
Councillor Chenoweth.
First today. Present.
Councillor Geary.
Good evening.
Councillor Peralta.
Here.
Councillor Payne.
Here.
Councillor Menke is absent. Council President Garvin.
Excused
Here.
absent. She has an excused absence.
And Mayor Drapkin.
Here. Thank you very much. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Councillor Chenoweth, would you do the honors of leading us? Thank you very much. We'll now take comments from community members. Any interested audience members are invited to provide comments, and any comment provided that requires some sort of follow-up will be assigned to a staff member. Anyone may speak on any topic other than a matter in litigation, a quasi-judicial land use matter, or a matter scheduled for public hearing today or at some future date. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person for a total of 30 minutes. If you are on Zoom and you wish to speak, please use the raise your hand feature or send a chat directly to our city recorder. Or Deputy City Recorder, and we will announce you. When you are testifying in front of the council, please remember to announce your name and the city you live in for the record, and to fill out a public comment card to be submitted to the Deputy City Recorder prior to leaving. With that, do we have anyone signed up in advance for comments?
I'd like to start with saying that Mark Davis's public comment letter for the work session topic will be entered into the record and will be added to the amended packet. And then we did have someone sign up, Paul Rubernick.
Wonderful, thank you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'll just remind you to state your name and the city you live in for the record before you start.
Good evening. Mayor Drapkin, members of the City Council, my name is Paul Rubernick. I live at 2243 Northwest Doral here in Mac. I had the privilege of attending the May 9 rollout meeting for the stormwater utility. I left with 3 concerns. The first concern is notice. The second concern is $100,000. And the third concern is patchwork. First, notice. The notice went out with no meeting location. There was no mention of the impending fees or costs or taxes. And there was a extremely poor and, in fact, misleading Spanish translation. I've talked to staff about that at the time, and they've promised to correct those issues. Second issue is $100,000. That's the amount that the stormwater, that staff has spent on outside consultants up to March 31st for one consultant and April 30th for another consultant. Raftelis is out of North Carolina. They've billed more than $60,000. The primary consultant is Christina Concia. and her area of expertise is finance and public relations. The Ghilardi firm out of Portland is Deb Ghilardi, and her expertise is economics and finance. Our $100,000 got us, one, that we all live in 3,500 square foot houses and will be taxed on 3,500 square feet of impermeable surface. Two, PR advice that led to that notice that was defective. And three, zero actual engineering data. Our dollars have not been well spent. The third item, my third care and concern, is patchwork. Staff has described the stormwater as a holistic approach and a holistic solution to stormwater. In the city of McMinnville, it is nothing of the sort. The utility is going, the new utility will exclude all private systems. I asked staff, what's the extent of private systems, the length of these systems, the area these systems cover within the city? Mr. Lofton was kind enough to send me an email back saying that they don't know. They don't have that data, and it would be expensive to get it, and if I want it, I need to pay for it. If you exclude from the utility large portions of the city that have private systems, you have a patchwork system. You do not have a holistic solution to stormwater problems. I have three requests. One, please instruct staff to make the changes that they promised that they would with the notice, and perhaps cross-pollinate with the city manager's office. I went there yesterday, and there are 4 bilingual Spanish people who can do the translation for them. They don't need to rely on a translation service. Second, would like you to instruct staff to no more expenditures on public relations and finance. And third, I would ask you to ask staff to define for you with a simple map what portions of the city are included in the utility and what portions of the city will be taxed as part of the utility but are in private systems and will receive no services. I believe the citizens would like to know that as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Do you have anyone else signed up for comment? I will ask that we do send a response on our Spanish language translation services and needing to have consistent Spanish language Spanish language translation services. So if we could send an updated information on that and our practices, policy practices around having consistent language, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Is there anyone else signed up for public comment?
No one else has signed up.
Is there anyone else who would like to provide public comment either in council chambers or on Zoom? Okay, not hearing any. We will move into our presentations. We'll invite the General Manager of McMinnville Water and Light, John Dietz, to join us again. As a reminder to Council, this is a continuation of the work that was done between the 2 policymaking boards, and part of what came out of that were quarterly updates from our City Manager to the Water and Light Commission and from the General Manager of Water and Light to the McMinnville City Council. And with that, welcome and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. I will go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So, Public Works Week, we actually have done this for at least the last 10 years that I can remember. I think it was a great event. I know the mayor attended and city manager as well, so I think that really helped and went well. I think both groups work well together, so I think that's a great benefit for everybody. The next one, Claudia. Right now, we are in the process of doing what is called an integrated resource plan for the electric system. That will determine where we are going to purchase power for the next essentially 20-year planning period. Our contract with BPA is coming up for renewal in 2028, and so we are looking at what options we potentially have for future power supply for the city. Our load growth has been fairly small or flat. We've only been growing at about 0.5% per year over the last contract. So we are looking at somewhere between 8 to 15 megawatts of additional power after the term of our current contract. So that was, we have actually been with Bonneville since 1940. That was when we signed our first contract with the Bonneville Power Administration, and they supply about 97% of our power. The remainder comes from some long-term purchase agreements we have with Grant County PUD, and then we also have the Riverbend landfill project. We acquire that power as well. So, next slide. So currently, we're in our water cost of service. We do a water cost of service every 2 years, and we also do electric cost of service every 2 years. We alternate those, so this year is the water cost of service. And as you can see, we're down on the lower end of that chart. That is pretty much primarily I think all the cities in Yamhill County, plus then the Portland metro area as well. You can see that Water and Light currently is just above Kaiser. So that public hearing was scheduled for July 16th, which our consultant will present the results of cost of service at that time. Next slide. Wildfire season. So the commission at the June 18th meeting just approved our electric and water wildfire plans, so our watershed wildfire plan. The watershed wildfire plan is not mandated. We do that primarily to protect the watershed. The electric wildfire plan is something that came out of, I believe it's Senate Bill 762, that we are required as an electric utility to do a wildfire plan, and then we file that with the PUC. Commission approves it, but the PUC keeps all of the records. Next slide. So this is our estimated revenues for each of the two utilities for 24-25. We can't quite see underneath there. I think it's about 49 million, if I remember right, and about 14 million for the water side. And you can see from the chart where the revenue comes from for each of the utilities. Next slide, Claudia. So goals for 2024-25. We are currently working on actually the third bullet point there, Loop Road. I think they have most of the water main in as of today. So they are replacing or adding that 10-inch main to loop that Loop Road with Old Stone Village, so that's a water quality issue there. Alpine, we're going to go ahead and replace the remaining 6-inch cast we have in Alpine with a 10-inch ductile. Our raw water line, that contract with Embry & Sons has been let, and we're anticipating they will be starting sometime in August, I believe. And then we will also be working on, our crew will internally replace or add 180 feet of 16-inch pipe to tie that into the Zone 2, future Zone 2. And then the pump station will be working on that project as well. Next slide. Electric goals, transmission capacity and resiliency. Currently, our crew is getting ready to replace 15 transmission poles along Booth Bend Road from our Booth Bend substation to almost 99. And that will take them most probably, guessing 30 days to do that work. Distribution line upgrade on Bartano Lane. Distribution pole upgrade on Peavine. Steel poles, we'll be adding 2 steel poles for resiliency. One is in both sides of the, we call our river crossing at Joe Dancer. And then we were designing 3 additional steel poles for the crossing at Baker Creek. And those are all tied to resiliency, making sure that we do not have to access those poles when basically the rivers are high or we can't get to those poles. I'd also mention that picture right there is from the ice storm we had early in this year. That was actually at Springfield Utility. We had a crew there for 14 days, and you can see the bottom of the poles missing. So, next slide. So some of the things that we're facing coming up, Portland area is the second most constrained in the BPA transmission system. And our primary source from BPA is out of Keeler, that is up by Hillsborough. The system there is, that is actually a PGE service territory, but BPA has a substation there. That area is seeing significant growth, to the tune of thousands of megawatts, primarily for new data centers tied to AI, and there is a very significant lack of transmission in that area due to those constraints.
Do you want to just touch briefly also on the denied power that's happened, that's related?
Yeah, so Forest Grove Light and Power had requested for 190 megawatts for 2 data centers in their service territory. That request was denied by BPA due to lack of transmission, and the earliest they could serve that was 2038, so approximately 15 years. So we are actually at the end of the BPA system, so we have significant concerns, and right now we have what is called a LLIR, line and load interconnect request in with BPA to see if what future capacity we have currently in our system. So we're hoping to see that probably sometime towards the end of the year. Slide. Questions?
Councilor Peralta.
The AI demand on electricity is something that feels like a bit of a hurricane when I look at the, that people don't really know about. I'm looking at a chart right now that shows the power demand, and there's a prediction that within 7 years, it will be 600 times what it is right now for those types of systems.
Yeah, the numbers that I'm hearing in the Northwest are 30% increase in the demand.
Yeah.
So it's going to be significant. And really the only resources we have available are on the east side of the state, which would be your wind or your solar, with no transmission to get it to the west side because we're the load centers over here.
So my question is, are you aware of, like, are the power companies like yourself engaged in any kind of lobbying or conversations right now with federal and state regulators about the?
Yes. Yes, and actually, we were back in Washington DC back in February, and there's probably going to be multiple trips this year to talk about this issue, but also I have actually had a meeting last week with our state representative about this issue as well.
Is water similarly affected, or is it mostly electricity?
Water for us is not affected because we control the source, where on the power side, we don't control the source and we don't control the transmission. So water, we're in very good shape because we control from the source all the way into town, so.
Thank you.
We don't have those issues with the water system.
Thank you, Councilor Gary.
Is Water and Light looking or talking internally at sort of policy decisions on if that's something we want to have in the area and supply?
As far as AI server data centers, we've talked a little, we've actually had some requests. We just don't have the capacity to serve those types of loads here. So it's really, it would have, typical server, we had a request for up to 100 megawatts, and our entire system average is 86. So more than double our system. And there's just, with our current transmission, I don't see how we would get that here, how that would be able to be served.
Councilor Chenoweth?
That was for one farm? Yeah.
So we see up to 300 megawatts in some cases. Seen.
Yes, please, City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to add, with respect to the lobbying issue, John and I have had a conversation about this, and we're exploring the prospect of a lobbyist to help us with some of our federal asks from Congress, and we would be happy to support Water and Light in that lobbying effort as needed. And so John and I have already talked about that
Yeah, I think we're actually interviewing a federal lobbyist next week, I believe.
Yes,
Yeah.
we have that on calendar.
Right. Councilor Payne or Council President, do you want to chime in with any questions or comments before we let Mr. Dietz go for the evening? Or you can, of course, you're welcome to stay.
I have one.
Please.
John, thanks for presenting tonight. Lots of great information. The one thing I didn't hear that has been spoke about before is more redundancy in the north side of town and kind of closing that loop out by Grand Haven. I didn't know if that's been completed or if that's still on the agenda for redundancy.
So we have a transmission loop currently. What we're looking at is 2 future substations. One would be on the northeast side of town. The other one we're looking at is at the Innovation Campus. And so we're actually working on an engineering contract right now for doing site evaluation for the substation and future treatment plant site on the southeast side of town.
Okay, thank you. If hypothetically, if that northeast substation was built, would the northeast side of town that had a power outage a week or 2 ago, would they still have that power outage if a squirrel decided to ground himself again?
Yeah, that would have still happened. That wouldn't have changed.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Chenoweth?
So, in your opinion, what's the solution to the power dilemma?
The solution ultimately is, I think, going to be nuclear.
And is that what we're going to be lobbying for?
Small modular is one of the things we've talked about. The problem in Oregon is there's a constitutional, a ban on new nuclear, and so it would have to be sited outside the state, which then, of course, leads to transmission problems. Again, because we don't have it here locally, you have to get long transmission or high voltage transmission to that site to get it here. And part of the problem that we face is permitting of transmission projects. Currently, there's a fairly large project called B2H, Boardman to Hemingway. It's a 500 kV line. It's been in permitting for almost 15 years, and they still do not have permits to build that line. That would be from Hemingway, Idaho to Boardman, Oregon.
I think I could expand it too a little bit. I don't want to cut you off, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to ask, so I get the issue, it has to be out of state. Are we the only state with those limitations in terms of with our neighbors?
Yes. Washington, Washington has the only nuclear plant in the Northwest at Hanford.
And what about California?
California has, the San Onofre down by, I don't remember exactly where, but there's two units there.
And how much power is California pulling off BPA?
It depends on what's going on in the system. So typically in the past, the way the system worked, wintertime, we would be pulling power from California. Summertime, we would be sending it spring, due to spring runoff. What is happening now is because of the changes in demand, that change is now opposite. So I'll give you an example. This winter, the January ice storm, BPA was bringing power up from the southwest, so it would have been through California to the northwest. That cost BPA ratepayers about $300 million in additional power costs because of the way the market was during that time. Part of that cost was what they call congestion pricing, which was a add-on California tacked on to bring it through California.
So I just want to add, Mr. Dietz's recommendation is looking at nuclear, but there's a number of other options that have been discussed, and there are this kind of similar limiting factors. So I just was asking last week about, wave technology, which doesn't have any of the, some of those additional considerations that can come along with nuclear. There's a transmission, even if that was in place on our, miles and miles and miles of coastline, there's similarly transmission issues. We talked about inline power generation, even producing some here locally that doesn't pencil.
Very small amount.
It's a very small amount and expensive to do, and so, but we did talk about that because, of course, we also have a very long pipe going from the watershed into town. And then the other thing that we have discussed, though, especially in DC, is if the federal government could also assist through market regulation and just opening up the group, assisting in refining the market so that we can more easily purchase power from one another throughout multiple systems.
And that's actually already started. They call it the day-ahead market, EDAM, Energy Day-Ahead Market. So that's actually being worked on right now. There's two markets that are being one market is formed, and the second market is they're actually working on forming, which is called the SPP, Southwest Power Pool. And so there's actually a market that is being formed for that purpose. It's not in operation yet, but hopefully they're taking 26, I believe, for that market.
To be clear, Mayor, I was not asking or responding to that in a way that is should be perceived as being negative to nuclear. I do feel like Europe has already gone that direction, and I feel like we're behind in needing to head that direction, particularly if we want to be doing more efforts at removing dams and the like. It just seems like a natural way to go. So I don't want to be perceived that if my question seemed critical of that, it is not.
I did not take your question as being critical of that, and I also similarly was just highlighting that currently nuclear is illegal in Oregon. So that's a hurdle on top of a hurdle, as a place to point your efforts at. Thank you. Councilor Payne, did you want to ask any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything additional from the council at this time? No? All right, thank you very much. We appreciate it. We'll now have public hearings. The public hearing, for all public hearings this evening, please state your first and last name and address for the record, and each person testifying will be allotted 3 minutes for their testimony. We're going to start with a public hearing to consider resolution number 2024-39, a resolution adopting an engineering fee schedule. Does any counselor need to declare a potential conflict of interest or recuse themselves regarding this resolution? I would ask James Lofton, our city engineer, to give a presentation on the topic.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We did not actually prepare a presentation for this, but we do, I provided all the information in the staff report. The presentation we provided at the work session, I think was pretty encompassing of what we're proposing tonight. And so I can give a quick summary of the description in the staff report, if that sounds good to you.
That's great. You're currently reminding me of Mr. Mike Bissett, who would start these types of things by saying, Mayor, members of the council, I'd refer you to the information in your packet. But yes, please.
I take that as a compliment. Thank you very much. So to reiterate what we talked about in the work session a couple of weeks ago, we brought to you guys a lot of information on what we're currently doing and where we need to go if we're to get to a cost recovery point, similar to planning and building. Currently, we're in that 5 to 10% cost recoverable with our existing engineering fees, and following suit with earlier direction, moving towards near 100%. These fees would get us there. We received a lot of feedback from council on how to implement these fees. So within the staff report, we have the proposed fee schedule that is based on that feedback. There's a couple key elements there that I'd like to highlight in that feedback. The fee schedule update would include It's essentially a whole new structure. It's meant to incorporate some scalability of the fees to appropriately accommodate projects that are various scopes and sizes, complexities. We wanted to give developers more options. It also accommodates current regulatory requirements for implementation of erosion control program. That is coming down the line. We plan on bringing that at the future ordinance, but this fee schedule looks ahead and already incorporates that future requirement. It assumes full cost recovery for development services, minus the reductions that we also note. The costs associated with the development services are also further explained in the Praxis Solutions report, the consultant we hired to do the study. As far as the potential reductions that we discussed at the work session, we expressed a desire to provide a 75% reduction for residents that wanted to pull sidewalk permits or other associated permits for those residents that essentially wanting to make sure that those improvements that they wanted to do on their frontage, we weren't charging full cost recovery for that because it's already expensive enough to do those improvements. And so those, we felt it right to provide a reduction to those. And so provided the language for that reduction and how we would manage that within the schedule. We also talked about a 50%, or also being consistent with how we've handled affordable housing projects, as planning and building have also adopted something. We followed suit, and that includes a 50% reduction, and we would follow the resolution number 2016-81 with how that's applied. So we would follow suit with planning and building.
May I ask a question there? Actually, never mind. I'll come back to it. Please, go ahead.
Okay. Then moving forward with the implementation portion of these, there was also a lot of discussion on how we roll this out. As Susan Muir related to earlier about how we would have a grace period and a grandfathering period. That was based on a conversation we had at the work session. We felt it appropriate to have at least a 3-month grace period where we say we give everybody a heads up that these fees do not go into effect until at least 3 months, and then a grandfather period to say anything that's existing in the pipeline already, that's already in process, we're not going to move the goalpost on you for up to a year. You have a year to get your project through the system. If at that point you still haven't made progress with your project, then it's time to move on to the new fee schedule.
When this report comes back, do you mind just updating that language? We've been attempting to take all the kind of gendered language and language that references, that's rooted in systems of disparity out of our reports and documents.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Thank you.
We also felt it important to really clarify what an in-process project was, and so it was clear to both developers and staff at the city on how to manage those projects that are currently in the pipeline, and so we included that language as well. Another thing to note, after working with City Attorney Mr. Leitenberg, we recognize that there's existing code, as we discussed back from the 1950s, that needs to be cleaned up, and so prior to this new fee schedule taking effect, we would be coming back to you to clean up that code and strike that. And so that would need to be done at least a month in advance. And so we would be back by at least September 1st to do that. And then the last thing worth noting that we discussed would be similar to planning and building, that the fee schedule would be adjusted annually for inflation by coming back to council for adoption. And I think that kind of summarizes how we would go from approximately the financial impact being of currently around $50,000 a year, taking us to about $450,000 per year.
Great, thank you. Does any counselor have questions of staff at this time? Okay, Councilor Peralta, thank you.
Yes, thank you. The staff report included several comparisons to other cities. It was unclear in the report whether those were the city's current rate relative to the comparators or whether they were the proposed new rates.
Yes, that was also something we discussed quite a bit in the work session. Some of the other comparable cities, it's difficult to have a clear comparison when a lot of those programs are kind of comparing apples to oranges. So we did our best we could to compare to other rates, but some of the scopes of what's in some of those rates is different. What we did try to show is what our existing cost was compared to what we found in comparable cities that they were charging. But it wasn't necessarily, like I discussed.
I'm sorry, I just want to be clear, that's not the question I'm trying to get answered. There was a comparison between the McMinnville rates in the packet. Are you comparing that to the rates you're asking us to go to or the rates that we're currently at? So, for example, in the comparisons that you have to Newburgh and Albany and all the other cities, there's multiple charts with comparisons of these rates.
That's in the Praxis Solutions report.
I believe so, yeah. I was just curious if that's the current rates or if that's the, if you don't know, that's fine.
So the comparison would be comparing what other cities have to our proposed rates, because we don't currently have some. It's a whole new structure.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to understand.
Okay, sorry for the confusion there.
Thank you. Additional questions for staff at this time? Okay. We'll now start to hear public testimony. Has anyone signed up in advance?
No one has signed up in advance.
Okay. Is there anyone here that would like to provide public testimony at this time? Is there anyone on Zoom that would like to provide public testimony at this time? Okay, I will now close the public hearing.
Mayor?
Yes?
We'll also like to state that no one submitted written public testimony for this.
Thank you. The public hearing is now closed. Oh, I know, tried to end multiple times early. It's that sunshine, we want to get out there. Okay, we will now go to reports from counselors on committees and board assignments. I'll start this evening to my right with Counselor Peralta.
Thank you. Council of Governments met in its quarterly meeting, approved the Council of Governments budget. I believe COG is doing work for the city in BIS, if that's correct, Jeff?
Yes.
And there was a lot of discussion about the state transportation system plan. There is push to consider a new revenue proposal for transportation infrastructure, but to our ear, after hearing the ODOT presentation on it, most of the money would be going to two major projects in Portland. So there was concern within the group about that proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Counselor Geary.
DEIAC had an abbreviated meeting. We lost our quorum and couldn't hear from our consultant, so we're having a makeup meeting for the consultant portion, I believe this week. And the other portion of that meeting was talking about the events calendar, cultural events calendar, the little discussion around the then upcoming Juneteenth celebration that we were a part of, which was great, out at Beerley. And then proclamations, talked a little bit more about proclamations. Affordable housing this week was canceled, and that's my report.
Thank you so much. And Counselor Chenoweth?
Thank you, Mayor. Parkway Committee met. ODOT reports that the bypass Highway 18 and 219 interchange project has reached an agreement with the project labor, reached a project labor agreement, I'm sorry, and with the unions, and it's gone on to the federal highway for approval. Hopefully, we will be getting this project ready to go. We are pushing up on ARPA deadlines of needing to have the money appropriated by the end of this year and spent in time. We have another project that we've been working on that we're calling the Highway 1899W Modernization Project. That also would be known as the McDougal Road Project. We have 2 federal appropriations from Bonamici and Salinas totaling almost $10 million. Senators Wyden and Merkley have requested another appropriation of $5 million, which would get us close to the funding needed for the McDougal project. And we are gathering up for the 2025 legislative session, which we hope will include a large transportation bill that will get the bypass funded. HLCMAT, we discussed 639 Southeast Ford Street, remove that property off the historic landmarks list. And we also discussed 609 Northeast Cowles Street and some modifications and repairs that need to be done to that building. They approved, and it gets really technical for me, and I am not a builder, so it's always interesting as I'm listening and trying to grasp what they're saying. But what I got out of it is they approved replacing gutters with a different material because what was used in the past was terrible. And so that's been approved. But there were some other modifications that were requested, and that's coming back before us the 27th, so that's tomorrow, right? Thursday. So we'll be hearing the rest of 609 Northeast Cowles Street then. And that's my report.
Great. Thank you. Councilor Payne?
Thank you, Mayor. Landscape Review meets tomorrow to discuss, I'm going to get this wrong, street tree improvement areas. And that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President.
Thank you. Visit McMinnville went live with our CEO search, and that'll be about a month from now. We'll be closing resumes. I think it's the 23rd that closes. And then the search committee will review those, and then we'll do some interviews at our August board meeting. YCOM hasn't met. Airport Commission meets next week. And Fire District, we're adopting our budget on Thursday. If you're bored and want to come hang out and watch us adopt the budget, and we also bought 2 ambulances. So one will show up next month, and the other one will show up in August. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations on 2 new ambulances. That's fantastic. Let's see, we had the pleasure this week of receiving and running with, and I say we, I mean our administrative team by and large, along with some community members that were in the area and came over from First Baptist as well, of receiving and helping carry through McMinnville the Sri Chamoy Peace Torch on their Run for Peace. And so this is a group of people from all over the world that are literally running all over the world to call attention to our great need for peace among humanity. So it was wonderful to be able to receive them here in McMinnville. I also put this out in the city, my blip in the city newsletter that went out today, but in case that's not top of your reading list every morning, I just wanted to let you know that we're pretty excited because the Mayor's Institute on City Design program that I was able to do with our community development director and our city manager, they came back and said that even though the program was done, we weren't really actually done. There was a new element this year that we didn't know about, and they assigned us two advisors to continue on with us, so from the resource group that was part of that. And we also had the opportunity to open up to more members of our staff, and so Noelle Amaya, our communications and engagement manager, is now working on that as well, and we're continuing to get feedback feedback from them, but in real time as opposed to a project proposal, that they're also looking at, evaluating, and giving feedback for us to carry back to the community for decision-making, et cetera, around this project. So that's been great. And then tomorrow morning, I'll be joining McMinnville Economic Development Partnership on a panel discussion for their McMinnville Works program, which is their internship program. So if you'd like to come join me, starts at 8 a.m. and we look forward to seeing you there. With that, we'll go to department head reports. I ask City Manager Jeff Towery to start.
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing to report tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Leitenberg, City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing from the legal department tonight.
Director Muir.
Yes, I do have something. You may have picked this up in some of the last-minute budget conversations we were having, but the Parks and Rec Department applied for and received a $50,000 transportation grant. Since COVID, transportation costs have increased so much that it's been very challenging for us to do day trips for older adults. And so we're hoping this grant will allow us to purchase a wheelchair accessible van that we can schedule some day trips with. And then normally when summer concerts start, they happen to land on city council meetings, and I want you to know next Tuesday night at City Park at 6:30, the June Bugs will be playing, so I hope to see you all there.
Excellent. Congratulations on the grant. That's fantastic. Mr. Henshaw? Nothing from you. Mr. Burke?
Thanks, Mayor. Nothing for the council tonight.
Thank you. Captain Simons and Fessler? I'll get you a microphone. Thank you.
Just one thing to report real quick. Sadly but happily for him, Ron Ponto is retiring as of Friday, so he's going to be able to enjoy his retirement, but we're going to be losing a key member of the police department and our building maintenance. So we're happy for him, but we're sad to see him go.
Yeah, all right. Thank you. To thank him for his service too. Finance Director Cuellar?
Yeah, we'll need to figure this out because you will be hearing from me later this evening. So just wanted to let you know the audit is getting underway for the year that's closing on Friday. Auditors have been in-house, and we've had nice meetings so far, but we're just completing day 2 at this point. Then I also wanted to let folks know that I will be out taking personal leave for much of the month of July, and the way that the council meetings fall, I'll be missing both of the July council meetings. And then I wanted to also take the opportunity to note that there has been, in one of our FY24 supplemental budget hearing notices, there was an error in publication at the News Register, and in discussions with the Department of Revenue, who oversees Oregon budget law, to figure out what's the best way to deal with the problem. They said, just at your next public meeting, describe what happened, and that is all we need to do. We don't need to redo any more resolutions or anything. So I sent earlier today, because we're just figuring this out this week, to Claudia to be able to add this information into the public record, and I believe she made photocopies, so all of you had those probably at your desk. But the details are that one of the supplemental budget actions had a larger than 10% increase, and so needed to be noticed, but only one of the 2 funds portion of the public notice was actually published. Somehow just the second one didn't get published. And so we had to, you may recall, we had to redo this notice because we noticed an error in the numbers. And so when we did the second notice, it was published correctly. So that was good. And then in terms of what we're going to do to help assure that this kind of thing doesn't happen again is make sure that we get the tear sheets from the News Register before they go to publication. So that's a step we frequently request, but when we looked back this year, we didn't make those requests when we put in the budget notices, so we'll be sure to do that going forward. So that is my announcement here. If anyone has any questions about what happened with the notice publication, I'm happy to. No? Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Lofton?
Nothing to add tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunsaker.
Nothing as well.
Nothing as well.
Thank you so much. We'll now move to resolutions. We'll start by considering resolution number 2024-33, resolution declaring the city's election to receive certain state shared revenues, and I would return to our Finance Director, Jennifer Cuellar, to present.
Okay, so this is the first of, I believe, 5 or 6 actions, budget-related, on your agenda for consideration tonight. So this resolution that's before you is declaring our election that, yes, we would like to receive our share of state shared revenues. And this is just a required step for us to be able to do that each year. And there were public hearing requirements which are met. The details are in your packet. And let's see. The resolution then just is a pretty simple one saying that we would like to accept the funds. So any questions or?
Any questions for staff at this time? Not seeing any, I would ask for a motion to approve resolution number 2024-33.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Geary and a second by Councilor Peralta. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, say nay. And Council President, was that an aye or a nay?
That was a late aye.
Thank you. The resolution has passed unanimously. I will now consider resolution number 2024-34, a resolution certifying provision of municipal services by the City of McMinnville as required by ORS 221.760. And I'd call on Jennifer Cuellar, our Finance Director, to present.
Yes. Well, what the mayor has just outlined essentially is what we're doing here. Statute requires that cities and counties that have over 100,000 in population and that receive, in order for us to receive our state shared revenues, we have to certify that we provide a list of municipal services, and we do provide 4. Or we need to provide a minimum of 4, and we provide police protection, street construction, sanitary sewers, storm sewers, and planning and zoning activities. So those are the ones that
we do that too at the library. We do the sewing activities. That's in the library of things now, but I'm surprised it qualifies us. But
yeah, well, maybe we can suggest to Salem that they add it to the requirements or something. So that is essentially what we've got here, certifying that this is true. And we need to do this in order to draw down those state shared funds.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff at this time? Not seeing any, I would ask for a motion to approve resolution number 2024-34.
So moved.
I have a motion from Councilor Geary. Ask for a second.
Second.
I have a second from Councilor Peralta. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay. And the resolution has passed unanimously. We'll now consider resolution number 2024-35, a resolution authorizing an interfund loan from the Wastewater Capital Fund to the General Fund for Capital Investments. And again, I'll call on our Finance Director to present.
So whenever the city engages in some kind of borrowing, the city council needs to authorize staff to actually execute on that borrowing. So that's what we're doing here. You are authorizing this internal loan from the Wastewater Capital Fund to the General Fund. The total in interfund loans is $606,000, well, $606,760 total. This is for 15 items. All of these things are incorporated in the budget that was approved by the Budget Committee and that you all will be seeing later on this evening in terms of your city's FY25 budget. I checked this morning, and the interest rate at the local government investment pool is not changed. So the interest rate noted here of 5.7%, that's 5.2% is what LGIP earns, and then we pay a 5% premium over that so that the Wastewater Capital Fund earns some extra dollars for this loan. And they are all at 5-year terms. And the first payment, the plan is each of these activities will happen during fiscal year 25, and then their first of the 5-year payments will be in fiscal year 26. The detailed list is in the staff report. I can go through them or not. You all have seen the summary. Then I think that's all I'd like to highlight. If anyone has any questions about any individual transactions or the program in general.
Thank you. Any questions for staff at this time? Councilor Gary?
Yeah, Mr. Renshaw, can I get a ride on that 11-foot rotary large area mower?
It says it's okay.
Okay, good. That's my question.
Okie dokie, thank you. I would ask for any additional discussion. I would ask for a motion to approve resolution number 2024-35.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Gary and a second from Council President Garvin. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed, say nay. And the resolution has passed unanimously. We'll now consider resolution number 2024-36, a resolution extending workers' compensation coverage to City of McMinnville volunteers, and we'll return to Jennifer Cuellar, our Finance Director.
So another piece of the annual dance. So all volunteers with the City of McMinnville are covered with either a traditional workers' comp policy, which is true for our public safety volunteers, or what's it called? An accidental medical insurance policy that we started last year with Chubb, which actually ends up being slightly less money, but the coverage is better should something bad happen with a volunteer while they're working. So this is something that SAFE asks us to do for its policy, and so we just wanted to talk about the entire program so people knew all volunteers are covered. So that's what this resolution asserts.
Thank you so much. Any questions for staff at this time? I would ask for a motion to approve resolution number 2024-36.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Chenoweth and a second from Councilor Peralta. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed say nay. Council President, I didn't hear you vote.
I'm an aye.
Thank you. The resolution has passed unanimously. We'll now consider resolution number 2024-37, a resolution adopting the budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2024, making the appropriations, imposing the property taxes, and categorizing the property taxes. And we'll return to our Finance Director, Jennifer Cuellar.
Okay, super. So this is the kind of the cherry on the top of the multi-month process that we've been engaging on to create a balanced budget for fiscal year 24-25, which starts next Monday. The budget that you have before you, included in the resolution, does encompass a number of changes from the budget that was approved in the Budget Committee over the last, I guess that was at the end of May. So in the last 4 weeks, we have a couple of more new issues have come up that we needed to handle, and also we made some budget additions based on suggestions from, or not suggestions, based on votes from the Budget Committee that we incorporate into this budget. So there are basically 7 changes pushing what's new. And part of the record includes a summary by fund, how each appropriation category was impacted by these changes, and also a detailed line item by line item list, if anyone was interested in seeing just the nitty-gritty, what these changes mean. So I can go through the list, or if folks have any questions about any of these, the reasons for any of the changes, I'm happy to talk about that.
Sure, let's just look to the council right now. Do you have specific questions that you're aware of? Would anyone like to have each of the changes highlighted before we move forward?
I think they should highlight the changes for the public.
Okay, thank you. We'll go forward with that.
Sure. So the first one was the general liability and property insurance didn't increase quite as much as we had projected in the budget, and we thought it merited doing a deep dive and making all of those adjustments. So in most cases, this meant a reduction in cost, or well, in all cases, it meant a reduction in cost. For every fund except for one, the balance, that additional savings just dropped to their unappropriated ending fund balance. But in the Affordable Housing Fund, it's, I think it was $100 or so. We put that into contingency just because of the way that fund operates. It was better accounting-wise to do that. So just wanted to note that. And then just the impact on the general fund overall was $17,749 worth of savings. So as directed by the Budget Committee, the municipal court is pursuing a grant for community court efforts, and part of that grant would be the purchase of a new court management system, as well as building out a more formal community court structure operating in the city through the municipal court. So this is a 4-year grant, and what's been dropped into the budget is it's year 1 of the revenues, and then the additional expenses are held in, we've put just in a single line item, and because it just would be a lot of work if we don't get the grant to go unitemize all of this. And then the other impact was my time as overseeing the court. We moved that back up to 10% with this project next year being added to the docket, whereas it had been 5% as part of the approved budget. So just whenever you change a support department person's allocations, it has a ripple effect throughout the entire organization. In this case, very small dollars, but virtually every fund that has personnel was affected. Let's see. Then the next, also as directed by the Budget Committee in its May 23rd meeting, was to add a planning manager position to staff. And so what's in your budget, the position is budgeted for 10 months in FY25 and is funded partially by vacancy savings. There is currently an open code enforcement officer position, and they will not fill that position for next year. And then just other small changes. like an
I'm sorry.
increase in.
Before you go on, I'm sorry. So you said the planning manager we added is being paid for through A, vacancy savings, and then B, defunding a code enforcement position. Is that correct?
Well, the vacancy savings is for that position. So it's not eliminating the position, but for the year, not rehiring for that role. Then it also, we increased overtime into code enforcement because the one staffer may need to do more, given this circumstance. And then there was also a small increase to be able to make an update to the planning fee schedule to reflect this change in its staffing capacity. So the net impact of all of this was $31,562 in added cost, which reduces the general fund's ending fund balance. Then let's see. Oh, the fourth thing on the list is associated with the grant that I already described for municipal court. So the total of this, the revenue for the first year, if the grant is awarded, is $315,000 and change. Then we have a timing issue, a couple of park maintenance planned outlays that we hope to get done by the end of June just aren't going to happen. So those got moved to FY25's appropriation. Let's see. Then, as we heard in the last council meeting, the Yamhill County's, well, not Yamhill County's, YCOM, the 911 service, they needed a much higher budget increase than they typically do. And so we needed to add that into our budget. And that was an impact of almost $50,000 over the course of the year. And that also ends up dropping to the bottom line of the general fund's ending fund balance. Then we have this is on the actual, I don't know what to call it, the actual resolution of where all of our fund balances are. There were $23,000 of fund balance that was swapped between the general fund and the wastewater capital fund associated with inter-fund loans from last year that are being pushed to this year, just to get the balances right. I missed that in the Excel spreadsheet. So that's the list of the reasons for where the changes are.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any questions of staff at this time? Not hearing any, I would ask for a motion to adopt the fiscal year 24-25 budget to make appropriations and impose and categorize property taxes.
So moved.
I have a motion from Councilor Peralta.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we should include the amounts in the.
I will.
Oh, you're getting.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
No worries. I am looking for a second.
Second.
I have a second from Council President Garvin. This motion adopts a resolution number 2024-37, adopting the 2024-25 budget in the total amount of $135,586,441 for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2024, to make appropriations in the amount of $106,077,132 to impose and categorize the City of McMinnville's permanent property tax rate of $4.02 per $1,000 assessed value for general operations and $3,023,580 for debt service. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed say nay.
Nay.
And the resolution has passed 5-1. 4-1. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Sick Kelly.
And sick Kelly, thank you. Or vacation Kelly. Thank you. We'll now consider resolution number 2024-38, a resolution adopting the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. And I'll call on Susan Muir, our Parks and Recreation Director, to present.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and councilors, this is the final adoption of the Parks, Recreation, Open Space Plan update. This has been a nearly 2-year process that has involved thousands of community members, and this now is the starting point for us to continue to update and advocate for the funding component of this, and we will also be taking this through the land use process, and then finally including this as part of the bond conversation that we'll take forward sometime after May of 25. So with that, the staff recommendation is that you adopt resolution number 2024-38.
Thank you. Any council discussion? Councilor Geary?
No discussion. We spent a lot of time. I just do want to throw my thank yous in there for this. The MIG team, John, and everyone you put together was a treat to work with on the project. The Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Advisory Committee for serving as the public engagement piece. We had a big meeting right here after a couple of meetings with them, and some key elements were added to the plan after direct conversation from people we hear a lot from and don't hear a lot from, and it made that plan a lot better. The engineering and public works teams, you know, you guys spent a lot of time with the park staff and the parks staff as well. Thank you for all your effort on the project, from that GIS nuts and bolts back of the house stuff to really make that plan viable and hum along when we turn the page. Susan, your park staff, of course, adding color to every canvas we could give them, and to you, Susan, thank you very much for pulling this project off the shelf and running it across the finish line. I know we still have more work to do, but as you said, tonight's a good cause for celebration. There's more to finish, but when I'm done on council, this will be top of the list of things I'm most proud of for the next 20 years of the community. So this is going to be really cool.
Thank you. Thank you for expressing all of those thoughts, and dare I say, on behalf of the whole council. So thank you. Yeah. And with that, I would ask for a motion to approve resolution number 2024-38.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Geary and a second from Councilor Chenoweth. All those are in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed say nay. The resolution has passed unanimously. Congratulations. Yep. We'll now consider resolution number 2024-39, a resolution adopting an engineering fee schedule, and I'll call again on James Lofton, our city engineer, to present.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Happy to provide any more clarification on what was presented earlier, but at this time I have nothing to add.
Thank you. Is there any questions for staff at this time, or council discussion? I would then ask for a motion to approve resolution number 2024-39.
So moved.
I have a motion from Councilor Geary.
Second.
And a second from Councilor Peralta. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed say nay.
Nay.
And the resolution has passed 4 in favor and 1 opposed. And I will now adjourn this city council meeting at 8:12 p.m. Guys. Guys and gals. You didn't vote on anything. Not since the Gwendolyn.
You just plan these. See you guys later.
Thanks, Have a good night.
reimbursement funding plan for that position.
At the end of the or that's 10 months from now's problem.
I know, I was like, what are you doing? I was like, I think he's gonna.
I have that thing in the morning, and then I'm gonna come over here hopefully to pick it up. If it's not reasonable to have it done by like 11, you're in my office by 11, just let me know.
Yeah, I know. Ron and Gianni.
Okay.
Here, just so you know, and I was like, hey,
It is.
It is.
Last night.
I know we usually complain about how cold it is, but this is
I
too
go to
much.
shut it down. It is like loads and loads and loads of what looks like Chinese.
I was like, darn, I still have that control over this building.
It's funny.
Yeah.
All right, that's just what's happening.
Love it.
That'll be the case.
Did you really need for tomorrow at 8 a.m.? Because I couldn't find anything else that they sent. And maybe these.
No, but I mean, I saw what you forwarded just then, so that's great. I think I'll just, I don't know, that location in it.
Yeah, the police department.
Oh, great. I'll just be there.
The train.
I mean, just take the scenario. I've got canceled. Oh, yeah. 2 hours.
3 mornings.
2 hours, and I have a 10:30 in McMinnville, so I couldn't even go. I wouldn't go to the winery and come back, so it would be like handshake. Thank you. Do anything. I'll let you know. I won't have my council computer. I'm really excited with that. I'll be dressed in it the day, as opposed to like going for a long leisurely run or something. Yeah, I'll be like, I'll text Patty tonight and make sure we're still on. What?
Got a glass of rosé on the deck.
You are? Sounds great. The problem with living alone is that you're always, it's like that sounds great, but I have an open bottle of wine, and then you feel like I want to open another bottle of wine. Although sometimes if I want to do that, then I can just take the wine to work the next day and be like, hey, everybody, you should try this bottle, which really is just finish this bottle and I don't want to drink it anymore. Yes, sir. Yeah. No, that's not what I want. I want to message to that gentleman why, just because somebody, they may be fluent in Spanish, that doesn't mean that A, it's their job to immediately translate everything on behalf of the city. B, that we need consistency in translation services, that we need to maintain a high level of communication. That's what I want. I was responding to the part where he said, clearly there's 4 people in City Hall that could have translated this, which is racist. Yes. I was like, no, I would like to try not to call out people. I struggle to find the place where you're not just blatantly pointing out somebody's racism, which makes them angry, but also get them the information so maybe that they can evaluate their position and correcting them. Yeah, nobody likes that. I'm trying to do that less. Yeah, okay, great. It depends on the context, so like sometimes they say like legacy projects or things like that, but it's why there's contextually, yeah. Existing projects? Yeah. Yeah, okay. Maybe I'll clarify with Claudia too. Yeah.
And I would. Yes, we do. Who's excited? I am. Me too, actually. Yeah. Code cleaning, that's like my jam. 1956. It's time. be amazing to no longer have a $2.50 limit.
Yep, yep.
I look forward to giving you some more administrative authority. It's gonna be good stuff.
So do you want me to take a crack at it first, or do you want to take a gander at it?
If you want to take a crack, that would be fine. But if you wanted to go at it real simply and bullet point or print it out and just call out ones that you think are obvious changes, I'm happy to take the first list also.
That works.
You just want to point out the problem areas that you're aware of. Let's do that. Okay.
That sounds good.
Call those out, and then I'll take a crack at formulating something coherent, whole.
Yeah.
We can bounce it around.
Take care.
Hey, you too.